Okay, so we are in rationals unit. This is our first lesson where we can multiply different rationals. So rationals meaning fractions. From this, you could FOIL or distribute these through like the numerator with the numerator and the denominator with the denominator, but that actually is going to take longer and it's some more work. So really the easiest way to do it is to first factor what you can. And so we're going to factor this piece first and this bottom piece. These are already factored up here, so those will stay the same. So what we need to do in order to do that is we're going to have to do p squared minus 5p minus 36. The best way to probably factor this is the AC method. So A in this case is 1. So 1 times C is that negative 36. Okay, we go, okay, what number times what number gives me a negative 36? But when I add it together, it's going to give me this negative 5 right here. Okay, so what times what? So we can do 9 times 4 is going to work. Yeah. So we're going to want negative 9 times 4 because negative 9 times 4 is negative 36. But then if I add those together, I'm going to get a negative 5. Okay. So I am going to rewrite that top right, now as factored. So I'm going to get p minus 9 and p plus 4. And on top, I still had the p plus 10. And so if I'm multiplying all those, that's what my numerator now looks like. Okay. So then my denominator, we're going to do the same thing. This 9 minus p cannot be factored. But this piece, right, we can take out a 4p from there. So we're going to take out a 4p. If I take out 4p, what's left? I have a p plus 4. Okay, and that's what's left. When you get to this step, okay, after you've factored everything you can, before you start canceling things out, I want you to set each of the pieces in the denominator equal to 0. So each one of these, right, this one, and this one, you're going to set each of those equal to 0. What that does is if one of these is 0, even just one of them, it would make that entire denominator 0. Because if this turned to 0, then we'd have 0 times whatever, but 0 times anything is 0. And so it doesn't matter if any one of these end up being 0, you would have a problem because you would have an undefined function. So from here, in order to figure out what the restrictions are, is we need to set each of these equal to 0. So we're going to have 9 minus p equal to 0. And so if I add p to both sides, we find out that p cannot be 9. And that makes sense because if I have 9 minus 9 over here, it would become 0. So our very first restriction is p cannot be 9. And then we can do the next one. So the next one is 4p. So if I set 4p equal to 0, divide both sides by 4, that's still 0. So p also cannot be 0. I'm going to save that up in the left corner. The last little piece that I have in the denominator is p plus 4. I'm going to set that equal to 0. And so if I subtract 4 from both sides, p cannot be a negative 4 either. And so those are the restrictions on this problem. Those are the numbers that it cannot be. Okay. Now that we've gotten the restrictions, we can go through these and start to eliminate. And so you'll notice I have a p plus 4 here and a p plus 4 here. Those are going to cancel each other out because p plus 4 divided by p plus 4 is 1, okay? Now, this one that's circled and this one almost match, but they're actually complete opposites of each other. So if I were to divide one of those as a -1, or if I were to multiply it by a -1, right, I would get negative p plus 9 or 9 minus p. And so it would match. So anytime you see this, it's kind of like a weird little rule to remember. When both signs are complete opposite, these are going to make it turn into a -1. So instead of like p plus 4 divided by p plus 4 equaling 1, we now did it like a p minus 9 divided by a 9 minus p. That gives us a -1. And that's actually the only thing that we can do. And so from there, we can distribute this -1 into what's left up top. And so we would get a negative p minus 10. And then on the bottom, all we have left is that 4p. And so this is your final answer. And so on the homework, I believe this is number 11. This would be your final answer. And then for number 12, it says, hey, what are the restrictions? And those are what we found earlier before we crossed everything out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do another example in just a sec.